Today, we're spotlighting an event that's more than just a conference. It's a movement.
We're talking about the Consumer Impact Summit happening September 16th through the 18th in Bentonville, Arkansas.
This isn't your typical industry event. The summit brings together purpose-driven brands, retailers, investors, and service providers who are serious about building businesses that do good without losing focus on growth or performance.
So what's a theme? Blending business and social impact. This is where sustainability meets scale, where ethical products go mainstream, and where logistics folks like us can help make it all happen.
All right, Brian, tell us a little bit about this consumer impact. As we just said, is coming up in September. Tell us a little bit about the consumer impact vision and also why Northwest Arkansas.
Well, Northwest Arkansas is a perfect place to do this. We be about 300 purpose-driven consumer product companies and investors and suppliers of services and goods. And topics are all over the place. There's a lot of really interesting supply chain topics. There are panels about finance and how to innovatively finance businesses like these. And of course, retailer relationships and how to build best, most efficient retailer relationships. Purpose-driven companies are companies that have set themselves up from their inception to try to do good in the world while doing well in business. And of course, one has to do well in business in order to have the opportunity of doing good in the world. Some really interesting Northwest Arkansas companies like Hillfolk is a company that provides crafting kits that are sold at retail. There's Onyx, which is of course a chain of coffee shops. Onyx B Corporation, and many of the companies involved are B corporations. That is, companies that are certified by the Independent B Lab as having the most positive possible impacts on people and on the environment. I think it's going to be a real great event.
This event is your chance to plug into something bigger than business as usual. And there's no better place than Bentonville, Arkansas, where global retail meets local innovation. We'll be there, and we hope that you will too. Learn more and register at consumerimpactsummit.com. Let's help build a future where doing good is good business. See you in Bentonville.
Welcome to Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. I'm Kevin Parkerson.
And I'm Kevin Higgins. Together we bring you over 60 years in combined experience in global logistics.
In each episode, we'll dive into the latest industry trends, share practical tips, celebrate wins, and share stories from the logistics front lines, all while helping businesses optimize their logistics operations.
All right, welcome to another episode of Kev Talks. All right, Higgins.
What's up, buddy?
It's mid-September, and I'm going to start it off a little somber. We're recording this a day before a pretty important day, September 11th. As long as I've known you, I'm not sure I understand. Everybody has a September 11th story. Like, where were you? I'd love to hear yours and what your reaction was.
Yeah, I can tell you, I remember it incredibly vividly. Honestly, I was sitting in my office in the Mitchell building. I had taken over the Office of Regulatory Compliance from Steve Cresson, and I got an email from Steve that said, "Get to a TV explosion at the World Trade Center." And so I rushed over to the cafeteria at Walmart, and I walked in just in time to see the second plane hit the World Trade Center, and immediately went into emergency preparedness, mode. Went and grabbed Brian Most and Rob Cusile and Jeff Brazil and down to our bottom of the data center and talking to some emergency operations folks down there. What do we need to do? Do they need anything from us? And no. And so the four of us gathered around a TV and felt as helpless as we possibly could be, you know, not knowing what was going to happen. But yeah, I remember getting that email from Steve Crescent and then getting into the cafeteria and just not, you know, not knowing what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I was at JB Hunt. I distinctly remember someone sending me an email or a text or something. I don't remember which, but said basically get to a TV. I tried to pull up at that time, something on the internet, and the internet was bogged down.
Yeah.
You couldn't get anything pulled up, and then the day just unfolded. And I remember, just hugging both my kids, really, really hard. The rest of the day, I think I left work relatively early, and a pretty impactful day. I remember thinking at that point in time, the world that I'm going to raise my kids in are going to be completely different than the one
man.
I was raised in, and it has been. You never know when things like that are going to happen, but a pretty important day. It's always a reflective day, and I'm sure it will be, tomorrow as well. So,
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
also there's a lot of good things going on as well. One of the things I want to, alert our audience to is we're a few days away from our 1-year anniversary of Kev Talks. So talk about, pivoting pretty strong from something very reflective and sad to something really, really celebratory. Really, really
exciting.
proud of us making it this far.
Yeah.
When we sat down to talk about, hey, what if? Let's do a podcast. We talk all the time. Let's just record it and then let's distribute it. And that's exactly what we're doing. But there'll be more to come. A little bit on social media and celebratory. But I definitely wanted to mention that, and really enjoying, doing this with you, but also, just bringing forward the voices and fulfilling the mission of what we set out to do with this podcast, which is highlight people and services and bring forward the voices and have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, it's an incredible privilege to do this with you. And I hope that we have gotten better. I looked at the first episode briefly the other day.
Wow.
And our number one fan, my mom, Kathy, sent me a text, and she's like, "Hey, I got caught up, and I just want you guys to know that I'm so proud of you. I love what you're doing, and the format has gotten better, and the tech has gotten better." And so, coming from her, that's, I love to hear that. So I would love to hear from everybody else, but man, this has just been, I think we're going to have, I think the second year is going to be freaking phenomenal, man. I'm so excited.
I know that it will be. We have a lot of exciting things, but you're right. I kind of liken this to, like you said, the episode 1 was interesting. I'll just call it that. But I liken it to, and I'm in this mode. I've got a 3-month-old granddaughter, and I think about a newborn, and then I don't know what stage we're at. Are we at the toddler stage? Are we learning to walk and now sitting up and, growing teeth and get a walk soon? I don't know what stage we're at, but episode 1 was definitely a newborn, slimy looking and swollen face. Look what I
like to think that we're potty trained.
Well, I don't know if I'd go there.
We may be in the potty training stage.
Yeah, you're probably right. We are in the potty training. But
I mean, just think you said you had a 3-month-old granddaughter. I mean, like we're 12 months into this thing. That wasn't even in the bingo cards this time last year,
exactly
right?
I didn't even know that my daughter was expecting. So but anyway, it's been a great journey. It's going to be fun raising this child. I thought I was done, but we both of us thought we were done. We both have 30-year-olds, and this will be interesting to kind of raise this child.
Yeah, this is awesome. I love it.
Well, listen, I also want to pivot a little bit to what's going on in supply chain. We always, talk a little bit about that. Overboard containers that, believe it or not, can you believe what has happened out in Long Beach?
No, that's unfortunate. I hate to see that. You very seldom ever see it when they're sitting at berth. And so I'm anxious to, hear, hear what goes on there. But yeah, I saw that last night in my doom scrolling phase of TikTok, and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at that. So yeah, at first I thought that's AI, somebody's killing it, and then it was just like, no, ABC News and Fox News and KTLA7, and I'm like, oh, this just happened.
That's funny. That's the world we're in. When you see something, you have to immediately think, is this AI? Is it not? I actually, in preparation for some of our recordings, I did see an article about something, and I found out it was totally fake. And I'm like, okay. And I had to really do some research to make sure that it was. But this was legitimate. And I've never in my career, 30 plus years, I've experienced overboards. They were at sea, in other locations.
Storms,
I don't recall
seas.
any being at a U.S. port, and definitely not at that magnitude and that severity of just watching a stack fall off of a vessel into the water. Thankfully, no one was killed, no one was injured, as far as we know right now.
Yeah, that's number one.
But that is impactful. Those type things disrupt the supply chain.
I think what they say, 67 containers or something like that is the last thing I saw, something like that.
Yep. Do you have anything ordered that you're looking for that might be on one of those containers?
No. I got a new pool pump in the other day, and it's here, so I don't have to worry about it.
Well, listen, we've got a really, really good episode upcoming on cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And with that, it's very timely. I just had I'm going to call it a cyber security event of my own. Many years ago, I did have an identity theft situation. I went out of the country. Nothing significant, but here recently, in ordering something online, fell prey to additional charges and subscription fees and things that I had to involve, the bank and potentially an attorney at some point in time to get completely resolved. But it falls into the category of cybersecurity and our data that's out there. And this episode is going to be a really, really good one for our listeners and audience. But on that, have you had any cybersecurity that you want to share? Any cybersecurity issues?
No, fortunately, I have not had any issues, and I'm such a I'm a stickler here because I am too.
I thought I was too, dude.
I use a password creator and a password wallet, and I have none of my passwords. They're just, I'm a big proponent of like things like LastPass and some of these other wallets. But I've never had anything. So fortunately,
Higgins 123, is that your password? Higgins 123 or Higgins 321?
It's Parkerson has a
right.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you have it. And again, I think mine is ultra minor, but it was just kind of timely that I was dealing with this last week legitimately. And now we have a cybersecurity episode. Maybe you can talk a little bit about this guest and how we came about to know Matt Webster.
Yeah, I met Matt down at a conference in Houston earlier this year that I went down to speak at, talking about some no-code technology, and he spoke on cybersecurity and gave specifics around a particular event, which we will talk about in this episode. And so we immediately invited him to be a guest on the podcast. So yeah, I just met him in Houston, and so I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say about cybersecurity.
Yeah, I think this would be a really, really good episode. Right before we get to it, one other topic I wanted to ask you. The new iPhones came out this week as well. Do you have the new one?
I have the 16.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I think.
Well, it's supposedly really, really thin, which if that's the only thing that's great and wonderful about it, what I'm most excited about, and I think you will relate to this, and I wish I had something like this in my travels, is the language translation AirPods that go along with that. Sure. That's amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah, that translation is going to be really cool. And so, yeah, they have the iPhone 17 Pro, iPhone 17 Pro Max, and
Yep.
the iPhone 17 Air. So the Air is like super thin.
Okay, we're going to charge them now for an ad. We just gave them a whole ad, dude.
Yeah.
Right?
Tim, we'll send the bill to Tim Cook.
But it looked really cool. But if I were traveling a lot, these AirPods would be in my cart. That's for sure. I don't know if I'll get them. But man, amazing technology that's out there, and more to come. I'm excited for my grandkids that are going to have these things as the basics,
Yeah. I'm excited and scared at the same time for our future.
True.
But we should probably take a pause here for our customs quick tip with Heather Rush, sponsored by Harry F. Long. So, Heather, lay it on us.
Uh-oh, did you make an error on your customs entry? Don't panic, there's a fix. Welcome to today's Customs Quick Tips, brought to you by Harry F. Long. I'm Heather Rush, and today we're diving into post-summary corrections, your key to fixing errors and staying compliant. Let's get started. Filing a customs entry requires precision, and mistakes can happen. Maybe you used the wrong HS code, or misvalued your goods, or even missed a PGA requirement. That's where post-summary corrections, or PSCs, come in. So what is a PSC? A PSC is a tool that allows importers to correct errors on entries after the entry's been filed, but prior to liquidation, which typically takes place 270 days after date of entry. Think of it as a second chance to get things right without facing penalties or audits. For example, you import jackets and misclassify them as shirts. The PSC allows you to update the HS code and adjust the duties that should be paid. Let's see how it works. First step is identifying the error, whether it's the valuation, the HS code, or country of origin. Then you'll want to gather the necessary documentation that is updated that supports the reason for the correction. The PSC is filed through the CBP's Automated Commercial Environment, or ACE, before the liquidation deadline. Like everything with customs, timing is key. Miss the liquidation deadline, and instead of filing a PSC, you're going to get into a more complex situation where you're having to file a protest. We'll get into that another time. So, some importers ask, why bother filing a PSC? Correcting errors early avoids costly fines and keeps your compliance record clean. Plus, if you overpay duties, a PSC could lead to a refund. But filing a PSC isn't always simple. It requires attention to detail and ensuring you're following CBP's strict guidelines. At Harry F. Long, PSCs are stress-free. We review your entries, identify errors, prepare the necessary documentation, and file corrections on your behalf. Whether you're fixing a single error or have multiple entries, we ensure the compliance so you can focus on your business. That's a quick overview of post-summary corrections. Have questions? Reach out to us today at harryflong.com, where you can also find your free customs compliance checklist. Thanks for joining today's Customs Quick Tips. We'll see you again next time.
All right. Thanks for that, Heather, for another great Customs Quick Tip from Harry F. Long and Heather Rush. With that, Higgins, I think it's time we get to the main event. Really excited again.
Let's get it.
To hear from Matt Webster.
Yep, let's get to it.
Today on Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics, we're diving into a topic that's increasingly critical to global trade, but rarely talked about in logistics circles with enough depth: cybersecurity governance. Our guest, Matt Webster, brings a rare mix of technical experience and boardroom insight. He's the CEO and Chief Information Security Officer at Cybervergence and has spent the past 30 years at the intersection of IT, cybersecurity, and executive leadership. Matt's vision is to help companies stop treating cybersecurity as just an IT problem and start managing it like the business risk it really is.
Throughout his career, whether advising Fortune 500 boards, leading cybersecurity for major companies like B&H Photo and Galway Holdings, We're standing up governance programs across industries. Matt's been focused on one thing, making cybersecurity work at the leadership level. We'll talk about what's broken in many companies' security strategies, how poor governance creates real world risk, and what logistics and supply chain leaders need to be thinking about before the next breach, blackout, or ransomware attack brings operations to a halt. If you think cybersecurity is someone else's job or just a bunch of technical jargon, this episode will change your perspective. So let's get into it with Matt. Welcome back, man.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Hey, Matt. All right. I want to know what drew you into the governance side of cybersecurity. Tell the audience, listeners, just a little bit about yourself, but tell us how you got into this side of the business.
Sure. To start with, yes, I am very interested in cybersecurity governance. It's been years and years of experience in seeing companies flail and flop. And I've also been on the sales side of the house. It's not just been the CISO position or global CISO. It's also been working with companies and seeing the different challenges across the board. A lot of it is throughout the Northeast, but I have worked with Fortune 100. I have worked with Fortune 500 and even small and medium-sized businesses. Governance is just a huge challenge. And a lot of people don't understand it that way. So that's what kind of drew me in, is just seeing the mistakes over and over and over again, reading the reports, seeing what's out there, doing the case studies. It's everything. Just over my whole career, it's got me so interested in that cybersecurity governance topic.
So go ahead, Higgins.
No. I can't wait to kind of dive into this because, when Matt and I first met, it just, he had a great presentation and spoke to the logistics room about what was going on in cybersecurity. So I'm anxious to kind of dive in. So KP, I know you've got questions to kind of kick us off. So I'm ready to roll.
Yeah. I think it's, through my career, I've had some experiences somewhat in this area, and I'll tap into a little bit. And I think there's some real world recent events that I'd love to kind of get Matt's perspective on as well. But on a little bit of on another side of it, I'd love to know, Matt, what kind of computer security system do you have on like your personal laptop, and what do you recommend? I'm sure you're the security guy for your household. What do you use? What do you not use, and why? And it's not meant to be a plug for any item.
Sure.
I'm just really interested to hear your perspective on that.
So I actually use enterprise grade tools, both for my phone and my computer. And the reason why, most of the commercial stuff that's available to the average user simply isn't good enough. Ooh. And so I've chosen to use those enterprise grade tools. I can work with it through my company and install it elsewhere. And I think that's really important. That's the reality. When you talk about the individual user, there's some good stuff out there. Yeah. But in terms of the really being able to stop the threats, nothing beats the enterprise grade stuff that's out there, because there are just layers and layers. I won't go into the technology behind it, but the technology tends to be a little bit better with the commercial grade tools.
So do your family members call you and email you all the time about security issues and say, hey, I just got hacked, I need you to help?
Luckily, no. Yeah. Just little stuff here and there. But when you do that, so I don't get into the hands-on anymore. I've been so focused on the governance side. I let other people handle those types of issues. Even in my company, I'm not doing the hands-on work. I do the hands-on work for the governance, for compliance, audit, a whole bunch of other things as well. But that's one I hand off to somebody else who's doing this on a day-by-day basis.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, but I'm calling you if I get hacked. So
don't call me, dude.
Or Higgins is going to call you when he gets hacked.
Yeah.
He probably gets hacked every other day.
Yeah.
Based on the sites he goes to. But anyway,
Matt, maybe for for me, just for me and for anybody else that's listening, and I might be kicking off one of KP's questions, but maybe just give us a high level or an overview of what the heck is cybersecurity mean?
Yes. Perfect.
So that's going to mean different things to different people. When you talk about it, there's so many different ways of looking at things. I like the broader perspective. Like, for example, there's something called NIST. For your viewers who may not be familiar with it, it's the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So they've developed something called the Cybersecurity Framework. And so I'm going to break this down in a way that everybody can understand what it is. Okay. So they have, the latest one has governance, govern. So that's one of the areas. So how do you govern all the different challenges within organizations? But it's identify. Are you looking for the problems? Are you doing risk assessments? Are you using various types of tests for your organization? Protect is another one. Are you protecting it? So great, you find the problems, but are you doing something about all those issues? Detection. So something gets in, are you aware of it? Are you utilizing all the various systems and tools to send it to say, hey, I know there's a problem there. Now I know what to do with it. I can respond, which is the next level. And then remediate. Again, so it's identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So remediation, recover, kind of in the same category there. So once something hits, let's say a ransomware attack, that's how you're able to respond. So it's very broad. A lot of people think of it as like this science where you're kind of getting this little geeky stuff and you're jumping behind computers and things like that. But the reality is cybersecurity is much bigger. Physical security, it should be part of it. Protecting people is another part of it. There's a lot of tools out there that are pushed to cybersecurity people like myself that talk about how do you protect individual people. And there's high net worth individual protection that's out there. Sometimes that's physical, sometimes it's people, but it's protecting that whole gamut. One of the old expressions in cybersecurity, I'd love to say I invented it, but I did not. If you have physical access to a device, you own it. So if your firewall is open, anybody can walk up to that with the skills and get past all the defenses that are there and do whatever they want to it and open it up to whoever. So there's a lot of challenges like that from a governance standpoint that need to be taken into account when you're considering the processes that are involved in terms of protecting organizations.
So, I'm starting to have a lot of questions when we started talking about this when we first met. But I with that definition, and then to me, I go down the road and I'm like, why do people do this? Why do people attack other people? I get like a ransomware, like send me $1 million, I give you your stuff back. But we've seen a lot of attacks that have not been that, right?
Oh yeah. Ransomware are a small subset of the types of attacks that are going on. And the reality is it's most of it is organized crime. That's where probably 90% of the attacks, and it'll vary depending on the industry, but usually from looking at various sources that are out there, 90% of the attacks are all about organized crime and making money. So yes, the ransomware is out there, but then you've got the nation state actors. Typically, there's exceptions to this. Roughly 10% of the attacks are roughly around that. So you do get some of those that are going on. These are people who work for their country. They go out and do things, and then they hack, and then they go back home, and then rinse and repeat over and over again. So that is a small subsection. The other thing that's a big challenge is a lot of organizations, when they are thinking about stuff, a lot of people think the hacker, it's the hoodie sitting there in the dark closet in mom's basement. Yes, occasionally there are those people, but the vast majority of them don't do that at all. That is not the image of the typical hacker. So you do get some of that. They're doing it for praise and they do enjoy those types of things when you look at the motivation, but primarily it's for espionage, or it's going to be for money. And that's really what it boils down to for the most part.
It's just fascinating because I've always just wondered, if you're going to do it, there's a motive, right? You're not just for the most part sitting here going, oh, I'm just going to see if I can just do this and just go in and take control of everything. But the tip generally there is a motive, and that's what you guys are seeing.
Yeah. Well, that's what the whole industry is seeing. I work off of industry reports. They have a massive amount of information. They pull up stuff from countries all over the place. I'll plug one report is the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report. Now, most people think, oh, the phone company. They're much more than that. Full disclosure, I used to work there, but the reports I've seen and worked with and brought into a lot of senior leadership meetings and said, this is where this data is coming from. And then it starts to wake people up because they have the largest data set when it comes to breaches and incidents of any data set that's out there, because they're pulling in from companies all over the United States, all over the globe. They're pulling in from various sources. But once you get all of that information, is there more information out there? Yes, but I think they've got the largest data set. So I like to work with really intelligent sources that provide this information. So some of this information is coming from reading the Data Breach Investigation Report for the last 10 plus years. So,
well, Matt, let's talk a little bit about Cybervergence. which, by the way, awesome name. It sounds like it should be like a
Thank you.
movie or something, but
Yeah, it does.
right. But I think the tagline is something similar to like cybersecurity as a business risk, not just IT. So, kind of explain the distinction and why that's so important.
So the tagline, I'm switching over to solving cybersecurity governance, but to your point about IT, I think that's a really, really big thing to pay attention to. So what happens is, and this happens a lot, and I've seen this, and I've worked with CISOs all over the Northeast. I'm very well connected to them. So I'm having conversations. I'm listening to the reports of others and things like that. If you treat it just as an IT issue, security is just a subset of IT, and you're getting things done, and it's kind of off to the side. In many organizations, and I think this is a flaw, the CISO is not in there on day one, understanding what the business risks are and getting aligned to the business. So from my perspective, cybersecurity is most effective when you've got a very, very strong alignment with the business. You understand what their challenges are, and you can speak in their language. That is very important because a lot of CISOs aren't necessarily speaking in the language of the business. They aren't using financial terms. They're not understanding what that business impact is. And they're not speaking in a way it's going to have a drastic impact on the emotions of others. Say, hey, here's what's going to take place. So Kevin Higgins, I spoke to a little bit about the Maersk breach, for example.
Yep, right.
That was devastating. From the sources that I was reading, there are roughly 200,000 computers, but in 7 minutes, 55,000 machines were compromised. That's serious. And so my guess is, and I don't know, I wasn't a member of them, but they didn't do their patching. And that's like basic patching was the issue because they didn't have stuff patched that was a problem a year before. So then NotPetya came out and was able to just devastate the company. And so when you talk about that, I look at that as a governance issue. The question is, why wasn't that taking place? What are the individual challenges? And do you have the buy-in to get the appropriate results done? If it's just the IT person, that's a challenge. And the other side of it is, it's something called that I like to refer to as assurance. And there's a lot of different ways of talking about that. Well, you trust, but verify. And so security quite often comes in, validates that something has been done. And so if you don't have that extra level to say, hey, let's figure out what's going on and let's really keep track of it, because you need performance indicators, key performance indicators. If you're not keeping track of that, you don't even know if systems have been compromised or patched or what the situation is. How can you actually resolve the problem? And I think that's where the issue is, because all of those key performance indicators ultimately come up to a corporate risk. So that's where you can start to say, hey, we've got these bad indicators we haven't patched in a year or more. I've seen some organizations that have systems that are 20 years old and they haven't patched. Some of them are implementing systems with patches that should have gone out, in 1999 for some of the scans and things that are out there. It is really frightening when you start to look at the big picture. But all of these are governance issues. Are you checking and validating what it is you're purchasing? Do you understand that total cost of ownership? And a lot of people are like, oh, that's cool. Let's just buy it. Let's put that in. And that ends up being a problem because they're not doing something called third-party risk. Some people like the term vendor risk management instead. But the point is the same. Are you really checking to see what's going on and validating all that? Do you make sure that they're using multi-factor authentication? Do you make sure that they're patching systems? And so that's another governance process to make sure that things are going well. So that's why I consider that a governance issue. And that should be something that should be brought up to not only the internal executives, but that should be brought up to board level as well.
Well, that gets me to really the next piece of this. What advice would you give to these supply chain leaders who are trying to get board level attention on these issues?
It always depends. If I could plug myself, I'd say, let me talk to the boards, because I actually educate boards and executives on cybersecurity challenges. A lot of them don't know. They aren't giving the time of day to it. So it's a big challenge. So IT people are putting this, like I like to look at it as a pressure cooker. And then if you got security reporting into IT, that kind of amplifies that pressure cooker. So for me, I'm also a storyteller. Get the KPIs. Yes, they're good, but most people aren't convinced by a KPI. Some of you, if you kind of look at your own emotions, when I talked about that Maersk, 55,000 systems down in 7 minutes,
Yep.
Wow. That hits somebody's emotions. Like, oh, this is why it's important, And like I was just talking with a CISO yesterday, for example, and he was saying, I have really a lot of trouble trying to convince the CEO of things. He gives me 45 seconds. My advice to him was learn how to say things in 45 seconds in a way that's going to have an impact.
Yeah.
Because part of what I do with CISOs too, I've got a separate training course around CISOs, is really help them develop the emotional skills. So if you've got 45 seconds, how do you communicate?
Okay. So Matt, what's that 45-second spiel? Can you recite it like, in a general term that our listeners can copy and paste
Sure.
and use that? What is that speech?
So it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, of course. But what I've already said makes sense. If you go in and say, look, we need to patch systems because our entire infrastructure could go down in 7 minutes. How are you going to respond to that? Whoa, really? In 2 hours, Maersk had everything shut down. I mean, they were dead in the water. I said, do you want that to happen? How is that going to impact you? So sometimes just these simple things, get that wedge in there quickly, and then you can open it up to a larger conversation once you capture their attention. So that's what I would do. I like to pull stories. I'm a storyteller. I pull in information from all the others. But the other thing too, and a lot of CEOs, I know it's like this game of how far do they want to go, but do you have the right level of accountability? I'm like really big on risk ownership. A lot of people think, oh, it's a CISO. The CISO owns the risk. Yes, sometimes CISOs do take on that if they don't want it, but the risk owner goes up to that CEO level. And then the board of directors. When you look at the different case studies, when you take a look at Equifax, sometimes they've kicked out the CEO or the target CEOs had issues. They will kick out the CISO and they will kick out the CIO, depending on the context. So you've got to figure out how do you communicate in a way that makes sense to them. Use financial terms, if you can. Quantify that risk. I'm really big on quantifying that risk. Like, look, talking with your internal people, we've determined that there is a $10 million risk for your company. How do you want to respond to that? I could remediate that $10 million risk for about $50,000. Are you willing to pitch in that $50,000 to help? And then you can get into the details.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a key, in KPU, and I know this from our days, back at the retailer, is you get people's attention with money, right? So it's not the $50,000 cost; it's the cost of being down for 2 hours. So if your CISO needs to understand is like, okay, if I'm in a retail position, what are my sales on a minute by minute basis, right? So if I go in and say, hey, here's the risk, we go down for 7 minutes, it costs us this. We go down for 2 hours, it costs us this. To do what we need to do, it's going to cost us, a lot less. It's going to cost us a 1 basis point of the risk. Right? So get their attention with the dollars as well in those 45 seconds. A follow-up question to all of that is, is a structure from an organizational structure, should we see a change to that? Or are you seeing a change to that to where, it's not a function of technology, but now technology is a function of security?
Yeah. And so there's a lot of different approaches I could say to that. You weren't intending to, but it is a loaded question. The thing is, you talk to a standard CIO, they're going to say, nope, it's a subsection of IT, and that's where security belongs. But if you're auditing that and the CIO is like, I'm wonderful, I'm great, and the CISO comes in and says, oh, you're wonderful, you're great.
Sure.
But we had this little issue over here that puts people on edge.
Yeah.
And so trying to report the right information is really critical. Now, when you look at the statistics and the reports that are out there, what's happening is in the last, say, 10 years, there's been a huge evolution. And so right now, and it depends on which report you read, but roughly 30% of CISOs are now reporting into a business function. So, and there's also, you got to take a look at the industries. Like in the finance industry, I don't want to go too detailed into it, but they've got their assurance layer, and then they've got another layer, and they refer to these as the lines of defense without getting into details here. Mm-hmm. But that third layer sometimes has to go through and do the communication because they're making the decision, because they're looking at the different findings in the audit within an organization. So it's usually an audit function at that third line without going into details. But that's really what it's important to do, is really take a look at the sector, take a look at what's going on, taking a look at the maturity of your organization. Because I work anywhere from, small startups to very large organizations, and taking a look at that governance factor and what's actually needed. The other side of things, it's really important that I think a lot of leaders need to understand are things like bias. The reason why you have a board of directors, you want to get beyond just simple bias. If you've got 3 board of directors, you don't have a lot of perspective in what's going on for that organization. You need to take something like an anchoring bias. An anchoring bias is, hey, you hear something that's got to be true, and you kind of ignore everything else. And this gets into all kinds of things. So there's a great book out. I love this book. I kind of live by it on a certain level. Never Split the Difference. And this is about an FBI negotiator who's dealing with somebody who has hostages. And that's what he does. He goes into these situations. And so what they do on the back end, though, when you're involved in those situations, is you get multiple people. You might have one person talking, but 5 or 6 other people in the background listening. And the reason why you do that is you need to really pay attention and really listen to it. A lot of people think they understand active listening. They don't. They think they do, but they don't. Because part of what that is listening, but also how do you transcend the bias that's there? The reason why you have 5 or 6 different people, some people are going to end up with that anchoring bias, but others are going to listen to other things. If they have different backgrounds and different perspectives, they're going to hear different things out of that same conversation. So trying to get beyond the bias from a governance perspective, it's what's so important. And so that's where, because people are making decisions, but a lot of times, and this has to do with the way CEOs and a lot of times operate. We don't have time. I'll make a snap judgment. Oh, tell me something. And they're off to the next and that's a challenge, because if you're not fully listening to what's going on, you're going to make a snap judgment without understanding. But they also, a lot of CEOs know, well, my mind can be changed later. But, when you talk about the people underneath that from a management perspective, they may not understand that. They take that as absolute truth. And so that becomes like something that happens within organizations. I've looked at organizations from a maturity level. It's very, very low. And so when they're very, very low like that, they don't even have a clue what's going on. So do you have a bias because you don't have the perspective? A lot of companies, they hire, oh, I like this person, let's bring them in. And so they bring them in and they're likable and they're getting along with everybody, but they're clueless. And that's a big challenge. Like this really shocked me, but I had a director come to me in the middle of an assessment I was doing. So what's the difference between proactive and reactive cybersecurity? Inside, my head just exploded. Outside, I'm like,
my heart just sank.
Like what?
But this is what goes on in organization. Yeah. But I mean, a director level, not knowing the difference between proactive and reactive, but this kind of thing goes on quite often in organizations that it takes time to educate. You need, like as a CISO, you need to take people on a journey, take them from point A to point B. But the reality is taking people on a journey takes time and people willing to listen. And a lot of times like, hey, well, that's going to cost me too much money. I'm going to go ahead and just hope I don't get breached and I'll get out of this company before then. That's a bias that goes in there. But what we are starting to see, and there's been a lot of different case studies out there that I've done talking about things, like take Drizzly. For 10 years after a Drizzly incident, and they're basically a alcohol company that's shipping these kinds of things around. But what they do is they had some data that had been shared or an access that had been shared, and that access they didn't turn off after they were done with it. So somebody gained access to it a couple of years later, and they didn't clean it up. In a good security program, you're going around checking to make sure that those doors are locked and making sure that, hey, what's this for? Is there a business reason for it? And if somebody says, oh, whoops, I left it there, my bad. Cool, but now you closed it. And then they go and close it at that particular moment. But a lot of people don't like to have somebody coming in and checking to make sure the doors are locked. But that's what security does. We're here to make sure that the doors are locked across the entire organization in about 150 or 200 different ways.
Yeah.
So that's really what the challenge comes down to. And that's where you need to really get past a lot of these biases and these simple things like, oh, make me look good all the time, then you don't get the resources that you need to go get that job done. And so that's a big challenge with a lot of modern day CISOs.
Yeah, Matt, that's really good practical advice. I hope everyone just kind of listens to that, and if you have to,
No
go
kidding.
back and digest that. But we've also referenced a couple of times Maersk, and I lived through that that time, and it was very challenging. But let's pull this into like the supply chain world.
Sure.
When you think of modern supply chains, where do you have an opinion? Where do you see the greatest risk? Is it ports? Is it 3PL systems? Is it ERP platforms? Or is it something else?
All
Is
of
it
the
all
above.
of them?
So a friend of mine actually does a lot of work with the ports and things like that. And I know that their maturity is extremely low. But the thing is, you don't have people who know that it's low. They aren't
Mhm.
getting outside advice to say, is this really low or high? And so it's a problem across the whole organization. When you talk about a lot of these SCADA systems and stuff that you'd find on ports, that's a whole nother can of worms. They've got a whole different problem. Like I had referenced earlier, there people are buying tools that are vulnerabilities that are from 1999. I was being very serious about that. That's through something called IoT. So
Mhm.
Internet of Things. So when you talk about SCADA systems, these industrial control systems, and there's several other names that kind of circle around the IoT world. That's one of them. They're built insecure. They're the tools that have stuff from 1999, these vulnerabilities that should have been remediated. 1999 is the year the National Vulnerability Database came in. So when I'm talking about that 1999 date, that's what the scanners are picking up from. They're picking up from that particular date. So you're seeing these systems like, why are we seeing this stuff in 2025? It's a big problem because you don't have somebody going out there and validating this stuff. And so then you're creating these half IT systems, half SCADA systems. And a lot of times they're separated out, but a lot of times they're really connected together from an IT perspective. And that is a recipe for disaster. And that's why getting into quantification of risk, you could say, this system goes down for an hour, how much is that going to impact us? Because the reality is, when you're talking about a lot of these IoT systems, you can't install antivirus on it. You can't install anything. So you're stuck with these ancient systems that are not really functioning all that. I mean, they're doing some basic function of getting things from point A to point B, but the only way to protect them is to isolate them in various ways. And that becomes a big challenge. Some of them don't have management tools. So, like with Windows, most organizations are going to be able to update all of them at once. When you talk about these IoT related systems, sometimes you have to do it by hand, and that is a painful process. So you really have to take a look at the context and take a look at the organization because, even when you're dealing with your third party due diligence, for example, yes, that stuff is out there, but they're going to answer like, oh, I do vulnerability assessments. Yep, I'm doing that daily. I'm doing this, but maybe they're ignoring IoT. Now,
Mhm.
most of us who've been in the industry for a while have known that IoT is an issue, but a lot of people don't really realize just how fragile the whole IoT environment is. So, all of those are issues, but you have to look at it on a case by case basis to really see how bad it is. And that's why it's important to bring in the security team, working with the logistics team, saying, hey, let's do an assessment. We've got external and internal assessments. And how do you write those questions? Sometimes companies like, oh, they didn't even know what some basic tools are. And they're going to misinterpret it because they don't have that level of expertise. And even
Mhm.
the lead managers don't know what to ask for. And so when you're looking at those, that's where some of the dynamics come from. And you really do need to create that holistic relationship between cybersecurity and the logistics team to make sure that they're aware of what those risks could be.
Yeah. Well, this next question kind of gets you a little bit into that. So let's say when a logistics company calls you after an incident, what's usually gone wrong, and what do you wish they'd done earlier?
It depends. Usually it's no patching. It's not separating the networks. Usually there's very little due diligence. The security teams don't have sufficient resources to do things properly. I mean, I could go through a whole boatload of
Okay.
issues. I mean, you could point to, oh, here's some geeky CVE, blah, blah, blah. But that's really not, that's like the individual cause. but it's the function. Like, why aren't these things patched? Like NotPetya, when it came through from Maersk, it literally, the patch had been out there for a year and Maersk hadn't patched. That's what's going on. That's a governance issue. That's being afraid to bring that up to the CEO. A lot of CIOs, I put out a study. It was like, I wish it were more people that were responded to it, but there's only like 7 of them. But most of the IT staff were willing to hide things to make themselves look good because they were afraid of the CEOs. And so because they're trying to keep their budgets tight and they're trying to stay like this, everybody's just hoping nothing happens and they aren't getting this outside perspective to understand, because they're trying to hide things. Then they don't want to learn things because then they know about it. And then the problems seem much deeper. Cause like one of the companies I did an assessment for, it was brilliant. Where they talked to, they loved us. They're going through all these things. Like, I don't know what to do with any of this. This doesn't make any sense to me. They've never run a basic cybersecurity program.
Wow. Well, I kind of have 2 questions to follow up on that, Matt. Is, what is the average assessment time? So if you were going to assess, let's call it a terminal operating company out at one of the ports, and I'm sure size and everything has a little bit to do with that, but is it generally, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, just on average, if you were taking a look at something like that?
So it always depends, because when you're going through and doing these things, and the larger the company, the more politics plays into it.
Yeah.
So trying to help them go through the politics, or if they're having me go through the politics, that's a whole other story, because you've got to sit down and convince people. I'd love to say, yep, we can clean it up. And a lot of times, the way these assessments are done, they want to do this over a period of weeks. So you go in, you do the assessment, then they have to go back and deal with the politics, and the politics takes 2 months, and they come back and say, hey, I want to get some of these changes done here, because we talked to our internal teams and they're going to look at things from another standpoint. So it really does just depend, because you've got to sit down and convince people that these are issues. Now, the really sharp ones, and I've worked with some that are very mature, everything is battened down. They're working with their third parties. They're part of their incident response scenarios. So if a ransomware to happen, how is that going to affect them? How are they going to put that? They've got that built into their contracts, working with their legal teams. There's all kinds of things you can do, but it also depends on the level of depth they're looking for. If they're looking for like a very simple one, it's going to take much shorter. I might be able to get that done in 20 hours. If they want to do like a global multinational, and you've got all these different sub businesses and components and things like that you're looking for, that's a whole large assessment that can take months.
Yeah.
The reality is it just depends. And then it's also what type of information you're getting out of it. So if you're trying to do an assessment of the cybersecurity program, and let's say you don't, for example, have any view as to what's going on from a software development standpoint, well, let's go ahead and identify that. And so that's a gap within the program that the business needs to know. Like, cybersecurity is not doing anything with software development, and that's a huge issue. Now we've got the low code, the no code issues, and things like that. All this stuff that's going on that the CEOs, like, I've seen some of the stuff out there on LinkedIn where they're saying, here's the new business model. You have a owner, a co-owner, and a lot of AI, and everybody's developing everything with AI. But when you start developing this stuff with AI, a lot of times the security is taking a back seat, and they're trying to get things done, and you don't know what's going underneath the covers. And you need a whole new generation of tools out there to even see what's going on underneath the covers. So it sounds great. You're right. It's fantastic from a business perspective. Whoa, cool. Let's get this stuff up and running. In some cases, it doesn't matter. If it's the site can go down and nobody cares, that's not an issue. I've been in organizations, they say literally no risk. Okay. The business decides that, not me as a cybersecurity practitioner. And that's part of the problem too. All our tools are going to say, oh, it's critical, it's moderate, it's this. But the reality is, we have to look at the business first. It's not about what does the tool say. Like, hey, there's a high likelihood this could be compromised, but where is it sitting on the network? If it's 10 levels in, that risk is going to be less. But the other question is it negligence? Is it sitting on an old system, but it's got a massive amount of data and it hasn't been patched in 10 years? That's something you might want to think about from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'd have a lot of questions if somebody told me that, there's absolutely no repercussions or no cost if that system goes down, because then I would go like, why do we have the system?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why are we spending all the money on the system,
But
right?
here's the thing. If you have things in writing, at least you've done the CYA maneuver as a CISO.
Yeah.
And you've created the ownership. Like I know organizations like, hey, let's just have an outside company deal with this. And all of a sudden we've lost them as a client because they think an outside company coming here and doing all the work, we don't have any risk anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
inside I'm like going, how can you even begin to think that? Because if
Yeah.
something happens, they're not going to blame that outside company. They're going to blame the people who made the decision to get them in. They're not running the appropriate cybersecurity governance over what they're doing to validate that they're doing things in the right way.
Yeah.
To me, that's a very interesting challenge when you're talking about a third party. And so that's something that you've got to take a look at. You've got to take a look at the ownership. And so it's about taking the right level of responsibility. And a lot of people don't want responsibility, so they're going to shirk it any way they can.
Yeah.
So it's
Or they want to
a challenge.
they want to hold on to it. They don't want anybody else messing in their sandbox. But other question that I had was, are you starting to see more people, specifically in college or high school or whatever the case may be, are you starting to see more people focusing on cybersecurity as a discipline versus it becoming something that they pick up along the way because they are, trained in Python or something like that. And now I'm just going to learn about cybersecurity. Is there more of a focus on just like, this is my discipline?
Oh, 100%. There was a report that was out. I forgot the name of the company, but it was done in 2016. And what that report did, it showed from a cybersecurity perspective, there was very little. I think there was out of like 52 colleges that were out there. I think one of them required a cybersecurity course to graduate. Most of them had no cybersecurity. You've got today's leaders. Do you think in their business training back in 2016, they had cybersecurity? No. They go in by learning this through the school of hard knocks. I learned through the schools of hard knocks.
Yeah.
Just like a lot of cybersecurity practitioners, we were born in the fire, and then the fire was getting larger and larger. So we see the problem starting to grow. But right now, I know a lot of people who teach cybersecurity. I know that the courses are much larger. People are more interested in it. You're seeing people come in and graduate, and that's their whole focus that they want to do. So absolutely, there is a shift and a change towards a cybersecurity mindset for people coming out of college. And it's going to be surprising for some of them. They start in some small businesses. They aren't thinking cybersecurity. And it's like, well, I was told we need to. Nope, just do it this way. Okay. And it's going to be a little bit of a culture shock for those who know what they're doing. Because the reality is, larger organizations tend to be a little bit better. They've been burned. They kind of get, hey, here's why we have to go through all these different layers, and they're doing certain things. But that's a big challenge is, how does that culture relate? Because you're getting the clashing between, hey, I've never seen anything, so I'm not really going to sit down and worry about it, versus the more mature organizations that are. And so there's always this kind of cultural issue that you have to look at when you're considering the company that you're trying to jump into. But yeah, absolutely. There's a change.
Yeah, that's awesome. So should companies, or are you seeing companies who actually are employing people whose job it is to try to hack their own systems?
Oh yeah. There are a lot. The larger the company, they're probably going to have internal people who are doing that. A lot of times they want to get an outside person to come in and hack it. So yeah, that's a huge industry. For like, if I go back 10 years ago, that was one of the sexy things, you go and do the hacking. Now it's becoming like run of the mill. It's just kind of standard. You go through and do it, but not for the smaller companies. A lot of companies just like, we're not a target. Who cares? But the reality is some of the times these scans, it takes less than 1 second. This was true even 15, 20 years ago, less than 1 second to detect a new, what's called an IP address, detect presence on the network of a system. To be simple, people are aware. The scanning is going on regularly. You're going to be a target. It's whether you know that you're a target, whether you know that this is going on. So every single industry is impacted. There's no such thing as an industry that isn't impacted by cybersecurity.
So Matt, I have no idea when this episode will actually air, but one topic that's really recent in the news in the last week or so is a cyber attack specifically on UNFI, which includes Whole Foods. They were hit with a cyber attack that hit critical systems, halted deliveries and orders. Pretty big impact. Had almost a 10% drop on their stock. I would love to get your take on what immediate red flags do you think they might have missed before And how could stronger governance prevent that type of disruption?
So I don't know the specifics on that. I did see the report, but I haven't read it. I've been really busy this week going to conferences and things, but I was aware of it. But from a governance standpoint, it's finding out where and how the people got into that organization.
Okay.
Now you've got the deep fakes, you've got AI and things like that. A deep fake could come in there, somebody saying, "Hey, look, I'm the president of so-and-so. I need access. Can you turn off my multi-factor authentication?" And then the IT person, "Oh, that's somebody big and important. Okay, yeah, I'm doing it." And these kind of things happen. There was one of the famous ones along those lines was out in Hong Kong. I remember, I think it was like $25 million they were able to get away talking to the financial orgs to say, "Hey, send data, send data, send data." But the reality is, you've got to take a look at everything. A lot of the attacks out there, you could just buy them because you can go to the dark web and go purchase an attack for, an access to an organization for $25, or less.
Yeah.
There's that side of it, but a lot of them, it's like, "Hey, we saw your gaming accounts are attacked. Great. We're pulling that information. Then we're going to go ahead and use that to gain access to an organization rather than trying to hack." So identities are very common. So during the pandemic, a lot of people started working from home. Laptops become a bigger issue because they could access the wireless in various places. So like in population dense areas, like in New York City, which is where I'm at, I can tell you there's a lot of networks that are around. When I walk around and do wireless assessments of organizations, I can go find, 50 to 100 different wireless by standing still.
Wow.
So when you look at it, one of those might be nefarious. And if people do things like, "Hey, always accept into the environment,"
Yeah.
then they're going to be connecting in, and they could be compromised just on their laptop. I know there was a government agency who had a hacker in, and they were broadcasting this out to everybody, that they got in. They were just sitting there on the plane going to their destination. They saw somebody looking for a network, said, "I'm from this company. I'm from this company." And they said, "I'm that company." Boom. He was compromised.
Wow.
And then they had the
Wow.
mole inside the organization because somebody had a setting slightly off. That's a reasonable one for most people to have set for their organization, or they click it and it's a user defined setting rather than a setting that's done elsewhere. So those are types of challenges that everybody has. You've got to make sure you train your users quite often, and that's important. They're the most important people in your organization. So it just depends. I've just seen so many different ways that are going on, but now you've got AI. You've got AI that's out there.
I was just getting ready to ask you. Yeah. How do you feel? What do you think AI is going to do in this industry? How are attackers changing their approach? How should supply chain operators respond to that?
So a lot of things. I mean, I'm a risk-based person. So I'm going to ask what's risky for the organization, and what would happen if this were to take place. That's what you have to do, is you have to take a look at those different contexts. AI is going to drastically affect things. It is starting to have some impact on how the phishing emails, I think everybody's used to those. And 20 years ago, we used to joke about the Nigerian prince scam. It's a lot better, a lot more sophisticated now. So that AI, they're writing better and better prompts that'll be used to confuse and fool people. But that's the whole thing. AI is it's a seductive tool. Because let's take let's say if you've got a company, and I've worked with companies that are like this, that, "Hey, we need this client out there. We can't have anybody doing it," but they decide to log into AI, go get a bunch of information and write up all this stuff to make their jobs faster. They're going to. Like, I know companies that have completely locked their doors and said, "You can't use AI." They'll bring in their personal computer, which has wireless to connect into one of the various wireless providers, and then they do their work on AI that way, email it over to their corporate account, and then they use that to go send out because they can get their work done.
Wow.
How far do you want to go? Do you want to scan everybody and see what's coming in? "Oh, that's a personal laptop. Nope, you can't bring it in." And, how far do you go with this stuff? Or do you just simply reasonably educate people? And it's a real challenge because it's a balancing point. Because if you can't get your work done faster, are you purchasing those individual tools to make their lives better? And the reality is, some of them do. I know some that have created their own AI and they're using it within their organizations because they're large enough to do that. But here's the other challenge. there are so many, I don't even know the number of AI companies that are out there, but I am aware of a lot. I mean, there are hundreds of different AI companies, but well, this one's better at this. And then I need this one to do this. And then I'm going to do this. And they'll get 3 or 4 different AIs playing off of one another to create the right tool and the right conversational tone to get things done the way they want to. So that's a big challenge for organizations. Hey, the need is there. They want to use it. They know the value of it. A lot of the users are very adept at AI. How do you block it? You say, hey, just don't use customer information, or to use an AI that's going to delete the information on a regular basis. So the risk is a lot less. There are so many different options out there, but it's about creating a strategy and looking at things from a cost benefit perspective to say, hey, what really are the risks? And do we care about those risks? Because as you said, you squeeze too tight, you've got a whole other set of problems. And if you're working with your lawyer, they're going to have a different perspective on things than you as a cybersecurity practitioner. As a cybersecurity practitioner, quite often people want to lock everything down, but as I just showed, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, listen, for someone who's been, from a career job standpoint, been impacted by cyber attacks within the supply chain, I know this topic is very serious. It can be scary sometimes, and listening to you talk, it can really be concerning. But give the audience something uplifting and positive about what's being done in the industry, so that they're not too alarmed. Give us something good.
Something good. It's impossible. No. No, I mean, one thing I can say, putting in cybersecurity controls, basically consider like a firewall or an antivirus, and it's more complex than that, but consider that a control. But implementing solutions and working with your team is going to create a great way to create a good, solid foundation to protect your organization. The tools that are out there are getting better. They're using variations on AI. I know there's like machine learning and a whole bunch of other stuff that I could dive into, but that's becoming a more positive thing. And the abilities to detect and find the problems. There is so much innovation in the cybersecurity space. I'm going to give an old statistic that I pulled from somewhere else. There's something like 38,000 cybersecurity products globally. That's a lot. There's no way any human being could even look at, say, a quarter of that. There's just too much that's going on. I'm reasonably well aware of the different tools that are out there, but it's stuff like that you have to think about. But sometimes, when you look at simple things you can do, there's another approach that you can take. So for example, in that case that I talked about, where somebody was sending funds from Hong Kong, and the Hong Kong police talked about it. They didn't say what company it was, but they were sending that data that's out there. Maybe they should have said, what happened was they had like 2 different deep fakes were there, said, great, I need you to validate this through Teams or Slack or whatever tool they have for communicating as a secondary measure. So great, they infiltrated Teams, they fooled people, but did they go through and validate it? I need your employee ID number to go validate that I can then send this out. You just defeated all of this AI. You just defeated all this with a process.
Yeah.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There's a lot of things you can do. And working with somebody who's innovative in the cybersecurity world can completely change the game.
I think that's great advice. And I think, KP, just back to the real world global logistics, right? So this is our real world now. This is something that we have to focus on. And so having a real strategy and a real focus on this is what we have to have. It's our future. I mean, it's not even our future. It is what is happening. So I appreciate Matt coming on, and man, we've already got you, KP and I are banging around the idea of a conference here, probably maybe sometime in 2026. And we've got you on the list of people to come talk. So we're going to keep you posted on that.
Yeah. But along those lines, I agree, Kevin. But along those lines, Matt, kind of share with the audience maybe where to find you. If it's not a Better Call Saul, it's a Better Call Matt. But where can they find you? How can they get in touch with you?
So the easiest thing is on LinkedIn. You just look up Matthew Webster. But if you do search on Google, Matthew Webster Cybersecurity, you will find lots and lots of hits for me. But I'm all over LinkedIn, and that's where I think probably the easiest way. Also, you go to www.cybervergence. So it's cybersecurity and convergence put into one word. Cybervergence.biz, B-I-Z. You will find me. And that's where you can contact me. I've got a contact form that's on there, but pulling in through LinkedIn is a really great way to connect as well.
That's awesome.
That's great. Well, listen, as global supply chains grow more connected and more complex, cybersecurity can no longer be something we delegate or delay. And it's not just about firewalls or IT budgets. It's about governance, accountability, and resilience at every level of the operation. Matt reminded us today that in logistics, a cyber breach doesn't just hit a network, it stops freight, it closes ports, it freezes ERPs, and it breaks trust. And when that happens, the question isn't if your team has hacked, it's why your leadership didn't see it as a business risk worth prioritizing. So if you're a logistics manager, a VP of supply chain, a board member, the takeaway is the same. Cybersecurity governance belongs in the boardroom and not just the server room. So we should stop treating cyber like someone else's job and start building supply chains that are not only faster and smarter, but safer too. So thanks again, Matt. We really appreciate you coming on. And thanks everyone for listening to Kev Talks Real World Global Logistics.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Kev Talks Real World Global Logistics. If today's discussion inspired you, don't forget to follow, subscribe, rate, and share our podcast.
Remember, every great journey in logistics starts with a single step forward. Let's continue working together to transform the industry.